For the implementation, there's two approaches that are frequently used. The first one is through the bean annotation, and the second one is through the stereotype annotation. So we're going to start this with the bean annotation approach. We're going to be using two different annotations. One is called configuration, which is basically used to mark the configuration class for Spring. And the second is a bean annotation, which is basically, it just tells Spring that immediately after initializing the context, add the return value of this bean into the context. But let's just go ahead and show you. So I just created this Java project. There is no dependencies added yet. It's basically like your boilerplate default start from IntelliJ. So I'm just going to run it, and you're going to see here that it's just going to say hello world. So let's give it a second. Okay, so all it says is hello world. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we are going to go to where it says pom.xml, and we are going to add a dependency. So the dependency I added is for the Spring context. Okay, so you can just write it exactly as I wrote it here, or you can use a different version. The book uses an older version, but it's the same thing. So now let's go to main. All right. So I'm going to delete the statement real quick. And so basically the only thing I did with that dependency, I gave us the ability to create basically a Spring application context, but we're going to actually use the annotation application, this one right here. So basically this is, and I can use this here, this is basically equivalent to just using the Spring context. Okay, so basically we just created the container. So what I want to do next, just to be a little bit more organized, we're going to create a new package here. So I'm going to call this the project config package, and I'm going to create one more package, and I'm going to call this one a bean package. So just give me 1 second here. Let's go to new package. Let's go with bean. Okay, so in our illustration, we created a Weedle class. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create a Weedle class here. And so the class isn't going to have too much in it. We're just going to have one field, private string name. And so I'm going to go ahead and just make things a little easier for me. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to generate, and I'm going to generate a getter and setter for my field, auto generated. So pretty much what I would have done anyways. And then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to also generate toString. Yes. All right, so basically we already finished building our Weedle class, just like that. So now we have it here right in our bean package. So now we have the main, which is what we had here. And now we have the Weedle package, or the Weedle class. So now, just like any other class, I can instantiate it here. And we'll just do a quick instantiation. And so I imported the package right there, equals new Weedle. Let's just do a system out, and let's put W, and let's just run this. So if we were to think about our illustration, I basically created a Weedle object, and I created a string as the annotation configuration application context. So the Weedle object is not inside the container yet. All right, but I wanted to show you this part first, and then we're gonna go here to where it says project config. We're gonna create a new class, same name, project config. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit more interesting. All right, so in our example here, we have an annotation called configuration used to mark a Spring configuration class. We're just going to put that there. We're just going to put configuration, and there, we've marked it as a configuration class. Now we have to mark our bean. So we're going to actually use the bean annotation here. I think it has to be capitalized. And then what is the return object? It's a Weedle. So I'm going to put Weedle. And what's the name of our bean? And let me import this real quick. Perfect. And I am going to name our bean Weedle. All right. So we definitely need to return a Weedle object. So first, let's go ahead and create one. Equals new Weedle. And then let's set the name. So w.setName. Let's call this Weedle Kenny. And all we have to do now is return the Weedle. So basically, so this is our bean. We put the name of the return type. This is the name of our bean, which happens to be Weedle, lowercase. And then what we need to do is make sure that we return the object we want to put in the container. In this case, we created a Weedle object, we gave it a name, and we put it in the container. So now, to prove that this actually works, when we ran this object that we instantiated, it was null because we never set the name. So say I were to, instead of creating a new Weedle object, I'm going to use the context. Actually, one thing we do have to put in here, we do have to add the name of the configuration class to as an argument to the context. So here we actually do have to write project config, and don't forget dot class. All right, so now we should be able to get bean, and then we have to put the name of the bean, or we can put the class name. So here we can put Weedle.class if we're just going to use one argument. And so here, so this W that I'm putting in the print statement is reference to this W that is getting the bean from the context. So if I were to run this, you would see that we should have the name of the Weedle here, which we named in the configuration file. We named it Kenny. So this one should come out as Kenny. See, the Weedle is Kenny. So the reason that this Weedle is named Kenny is because we already set the name here. So that means that we must be using the object that is in the instance, an object that is in the container. So that's how we know that we're using it. That's how we know that it works. Additionally, you can add more beans. So let's say I wanted to add another bean. You could do that. So here, let's go ahead and use a string, and we'll call this bean hello, and we're gonna return hello spring world. So let's create another bean. We're going to use an integer. Let's call it 2. And return 2. Now, if I were to go here, let's say I create a string object called s equals context dot get bean, and then all I have to do is string dot class, And then let's do a system out statement and just do a toString. And the last one was an integer object equals, same thing. We're pulling all of this from the context. So we're going into the context. We're getting the beans that we just created. And here, integer dot class, and then system out, and then we're going to go ahead and just print it. So when we run this, we're getting an instance of all these beans, and then we're just printing them out. We're basically testing that we're actually able to get the beans from the context. So here you'll see the first one, which we already know, Weedle, which is named Kenny, like we did in the configuration file. Here we have a string that says hello spring world, which is what we put as our instance. And then we have 2. So basically this is how you create beans, and this is how you put those beans in the context through the configuration file. Another thing I do want to show you is, what if I have another bean that has the same name as this one? So let's call this one Weedle2, and let's not name him Kenny. We can just name him John. So say I were to delete all this, and now I were to run this. Here's what's interesting about this. We're going to the context, we're getting a bean, and we're just giving it the class type. But in this case, we have 2 beans that share that class. So we should actually get an error. Here, the error says no qualifying bean of type bean.weedle available. Expected single matching but found 2. It found Weedle and Weedle2. So basically it cannot differentiate between these 2 when they share the same class. So one alternative you could do is you can actually put a second argument to this. So we can name this one Weedle2, which is the name of the bean. So if I go here, this is the name of the bean. So this bean is called Weedle2. So when I put that there, it should work now because it knows which Weedle object or bean you want to grab, since it's able to identify the name. And so here we go with name equals John. So basically, I just want to show you that you can have multiple beans that share the same class, but they can have different names. Another way you can name the beans, you can just write name equals, I don't know, let's say JFK. So in this case, I'm renaming the bean JFK. And so if I do that, I should be able to write it here, JFK. We should still get John. So there's essentially different approaches to doing this. And then there's another thing I do want to show you. When you have beans that share the same class, you can actually use another annotation. So you see we're still getting John. So let's say we have another one here. Let's say we have this here. Oh, we don't have to name them. Okay. Let's go with Weedle3. But I can add another annotation called primary, which basically means that if we're calling any class that share the name, the primary will be the default one, unless specifically requested for a named shared class. So in this case, if I were to get rid of this name here, and I were to just run, if I were to just run this, it should come up with Weedle3. So let's see. So Weedle